Hi there. Today I'm going to talk to you about something that's a little bit counterintuitive to what you may be used to, and that's the concept of antifragility. Now, antifragility is a concept that was actually created by an economist and mathematician named Nicholas Taleb, which he used to determine events in history that are called black swan events, which are rare occurrences that have large impact, things such as the housing market crash, which occurred back in the 2000s, and things like that. And he was able to make a profit on these concepts. And the way that was done is by really understanding when something is going to happen and determining what the possible options are, the decisions that you can make when those things happen. So you can kind of think of this as, if you look at the Rocky movies, Rocky would get his ass kicked in the beginning of every movie. And he actually used this to his advantage because it made him angry, and then he came back with a passion and he ended up winning the round. You can use the same concept that Rocky used, but you can use it in IT. Now, one of the big problems that you have with architecture is that the traditional way of making sure that something is robust or strong or able to withstand failure is by building up larger and larger infrastructure, and eventually becomes so large and so complex that it will actually fall upon its own weight. An example of that is if you look at very, very large buildings. Here's an example of the cathedral at Notre Dame. And you can see that on the sides of these buildings are what are called flying buttresses, which are used to hold the entire building up. And although it may be beautiful and it's very complex and it's very functional, it takes a lot of engineering in order to make sure that this works properly and that the whole environment doesn't completely just fall apart. So this adds complexity, it adds engineering, it adds risk to the environment. Now, that same situation is true when you start looking at IT infrastructure. If you start building it larger and larger and adding more components to fix problems because of the scale, you're going to be adding complexity, you're going to be adding risk, you're going to be adding additional components to manage it to make sure that it doesn't fall apart. So an alternative to that, which has become a lot more popular over the past few years, is by using innovation, agility, science, and concepts such as hyperconvergence, cloud-native apps, software-defined networking. All these things address these issues. But the one thing that they don't address, in which the industry is really ignoring, is the fact that in order to implement these properly, it's a rip and replace. You have to have a greenfield environment. There's no transition plan to go from existing environments over to transition environments and having that for long periods of time. And that's not how the real world works. In the real world, there will be a mix of generations of technology. There will always be risk. Things will fail. So the key is to be able to balance cost versus risk. So how do you do that? There's a number of different ways. One of them is by doing a probabilistic risk assessment, by determining how likely each component in your environment is likely to fail. Once you know the probability of that, then you can assign a weight to that to determine how much money you're going to put towards making sure that that doesn't fail. So instead of building large environments that have redundancy at every single component, you determine what's going to fail and you bolster that weakness. So by identifying the risks and bolstering just the weak areas, you're able to reduce the amount of cost that's required to build a large, redundant, resilient environment. Also, you can plan for failure. By knowing the probability or the likelihood that something is going to fail, you can plan for it to fail and have a plan in place for that. Whether it's changing to a different architecture, whether it's having a strategy for when that point in time occurs, or whether it's a combination of having the failed components become reused as other components in your environment to provide different services, it's important to do that. You have to have a plan B, you have to have a plan C, D, E, and F, until there's no more plans you can possibly have. So it's not about adding complexity, it's not about changing technologies, but really understanding what you have and what's going to happen to it over time. So if you like the things I'm talking about right now, I have another session which is going to happen on Wednesday at 1 p.m. at the Manly level, or Manly L level 2. Feel free to drop on by. Or you can read one of the books in the IT Architect series. There's a number of these out right now, or on their way coming out. Right now there's the Foundation of the Art of Infrastructure Design by John Rashid and Mark Gabrielinsky and Chris McCain. That is a fantastic book, and I strongly recommend reading it. I'm writing the second book in the series, which is called Designing Risk in IT Infrastructure, and that's going to be due out in first quarter of Q17. And there's also a third book in the works, which is called Hybrid Cloud, and that's by Brandon Hod, which is also part of the series. Designingrisk.com. Thank you very much.